I really think the way forward is to aggressively just bring in as many foreign direct investors as possible. Just bring them in. Get rid of all these restrictions. Bring all the job creating foreign investors in.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the G5 Philippines podcast. And with me today, I have Orion Perez D. We actually did a podcast about a month ago, and Orion spent 24 years in Singapore working in IT, project management, and consulting. And over the years, he's developed a strong perspective on economics, governance, and policy, particularly when it comes to how the Philippines can position itself for growth. He's also been active in advocating for economic reform that could open up more opportunity for Filipinos and attract foreign investment. So, today we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about whether the Philippines is truly ready for foreign investors and what industries have potential, the challenges that still stand in the way, and what should foreigners know about considering business opportunities here. And so, Orion, it's great to have you on again.
Thanks for having me back on your show, Gail.
Well,
I'm glad to
just
be here.
the same as last time. It's really truly my pleasure. Um, and for those who may not be familiar with you yet, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
All right. Well, yeah, like you said, I was working in IT, basically as a project manager and tech consultant over in Singapore. And really it was my experience of being there where I constantly get to see how countries like Singapore have been able to progress, particularly when back in the 50s and 60s they were worse off than the Philippines. At least most of their
Mm.
people were. And so, yeah, Singapore actually informed me a lot about what the possibilities are for a developing country. I said something's got to be done. I think a lot of people are somehow opposed to reforms that they don't understand because these
Yeah,
reforms that I'm advocating are reforms that have been talked about since the 1990s. And a lot of people in mass media have sort of made it look like these are bad things, these are going to make things worse. And it's just that people don't understand them. And I'm
right.
hoping that by making people understand them better and how they've worked for so many other countries that are very similar to us, the Philippines can finally be able to adopt these reforms. The
Right.
reforms that should have happened long ago.
Well, and as a foreigner, you as a Filipino, obviously your interests are, somewhat different than mine, perhaps somewhat the same too, but at the same time, it's like as a foreigner, my interests are what are the opportunities, but on a more personal level is more about what is the Philippines going to have to offer, my kids when they, grow up. And so watching these videos, I know they're a little bit lengthy, but hopefully we're, providing some value, some good information. And, as much as people beg for subscribes and they beg for likes and stuff, I try not to do that too much. But what I do ask for is before you start typing in the comments, please watch the video, watch it all the way through so that you can get the full benefit of everything that is being said. Because chances are you're going to get a response to your question just by simply watching the video. And we create these in such a way that if you want to, just lay your phone down, just go about your business and just listen. In fact, to do a little bit of a commercial, this is you probably found this on YouTube. The audio version of this is also on Spotify, and there will be a link to that in the description. So, yeah, one of the things that I wanted to get, tap you on, and simply because I can read about this, but I don't know about this stuff. But
Mhm.
I know that there's this policy, for 60/40, so 60% being owned by a Filipino national and 40%, opportunity for the foreign investor. So, can you elaborate more on what that means? What are the restrictions with that? How difficult is it? Is it even a successful policy?
Okay, well, yeah, the 60 40 rule It's actually like an ownership restriction that's aimed to sort of try to promote majority ownership by companies. Sorry, this is a rule. Sorry. Let me start again.
Yeah.
So the 60/40 restrictions are actually rules that are aimed at promoting greater or majority Filipino ownership in businesses. And what they're trying to do is to say, well, um, any companies that fall under a certain set of categories will have to be owned 60% or more by Filipinos and 40% or less by foreigners. Now, there is an ever-changing set of rules. It's called the Foreign Investment Negative List, and that's kind of always changing. I don't know, every year or every 2 years or something like that. Um, so it's hard to navigate because it's always changing. Sometimes they add, sometimes they
Hmm.
remove, but most of the time it's adding. And
Wow.
that's partly the reason because partly the reason for that is because the Constitution of the Philippines mandates Congress to regularly add sectors that would be restricted.
Wow.
So yeah, it's kind of like there's this clause in Article 12 of the Constitution that basically says that Congress is mandated or is compelled to have to um, add in sectors that would be restricted. So I
Right.
don't know. The way I feel is that when any foreign investor gets to see that in the Constitution, and that's one of the first things that they look at when they consider whether they should go into a country or not. They want to see, okay, what are the laws or what are the
Right.
policies of a country like? And they
Well,
see the
and
Philippines, they see that, and then oh no, what
yeah.
if our sector suddenly gets joined in?
Well, and then, there's the concern, of course, that, the foreigner is, even though, okay, let's just be real about it. Let's
Yep.
say, in probably the majority of cases, the foreigner is actually covering the cost, but
Oh yeah, yeah.
handing that 60% to the Filipino national in order to be legal, with the setup. So, the Western investor, of course, is hesitant, even reluctant, because they can't legally, have full control of their business. But I wanted to also, I hear a lot about Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, that allow full foreign ownership in certain industries. I mean, is that why perhaps they're pulling ahead, or maybe they're looked upon more favorably than the Philippines?
Yes, indeed. That is exactly it. Actually, if I'm not mistaken, in the whole world, I think we are the only country that has set up these 60/40
Mm,
rules inside the Constitution.
hmm hmm
So all the other countries in the rest of Southeast Asia, or even in the rest of the world, no, none of them actually have these kinds of restrictions in their constitution.
hmm
Other countries, they do have forms of restrictions. I mean, like Thailand also has, for example, they have something like I think it's if I'm not mistaken, I think it's a 49/51% rule.
hmm
But then I think it doesn't go for all companies. It's just for certain companies, and it's not in the Constitution. It's actually just in legislation,
hmm
right? So when any when companies do a survey, oh, should we go to the Philippines or should we go to Thailand or should we go to Malaysia, they all do a quick check on the Constitution. So they send all these, they tell their legal department, can you check out the constitutions of all these different countries? And then the legal department goes and does a check, and the only country that pops up in the radar as having these in the Constitution is the Philippines. So that's kind of why I really think
Well, but answer
that's why
me,
we get removed from the list.
and that's logical. That's easy to understand. It's easy to get. But, you know, when I think about those other countries, and they're all beautiful countries, by the way, I have a particular bias to the Philippines, but, when it comes to those other countries, the English speaking skills are far less, in my opinion, than the Philippines. And whether you're in India, Indonesia, Malaysia, or the Philippines, any of these countries, don't you sort of want a national, a local national liaison to, you know, because it's one thing on paper, but it's another thing on the street, and you got to have that local savvy to really,
Indeed.
of course, you've got to find somebody that you can trust because, you can find savvy well enough, easy enough, but can you find trustworthy savvy? So it's
Yeah,
a real,
yeah.
it's a real, dance, so to speak, to find that perfect setup.
I know, I know. Other countries, for example, whatever they, I don't know, Malaysia and Vietnam, whatever. If, a lot of the times they don't really require foreign companies to come in with to have them find a majority local owner.
Hmm.
They're basically just going to say, well, hey, we encourage you to find a partner. Maybe maybe they'll own 20%, but they're not saying, well, you got to give them the whole house, like, or you have to give them like 60%,
Yeah.
which is, that's majority,
Right.
right? So
Right.
I think that's the mistake that the Philippines made by 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 making it a 60% or more requirement for locals to own the business. That's a major impediment. That's making it harder for um, for foreign
Yeah.
investors and foreign companies to actually come in and decide.
Well,
I mean, I think top of mind, they would have all said, Philippines, we want to go to the Philippines. They
yeah.
produce a lot of
Yeah.
graduates. They've got
Yeah.
English.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They
But
use English here and stuff
that,
like that. But then that's
that's
the
my,
problem.
that's exactly my point. Well, so the other thing too is we, and by the way, for the audience sake, a lot of this seems to lean towards, big corporate investment, but let's bring it down to sort of the everyday man's level, uh, let's say, I mean, here in San Carlos where I live, I would love it. Greenwich Pizza is about the closest, local based pizza, to an American style, pizza. And, I love going over to Bacolod or Cebu or wherever and getting in fact, I'll generally walk into Greenwich before I go to Pizza Hut, strangely enough. Why can't we bring a Greenwich here? Well, so then as a foreigner, and let's say I have a little bit of money, which I don't have a lot of money, but let's say I wanted to personally tackle, buying a franchise and bringing Greenwich to San Carlos. I think this is a fantastic market. I think it could do extremely well. So even for me myself, do I am I going in 60%, 60/40 with Greenwich, or am I going in 60/40% with, let's say my wife as the Filipino national? Can you talk a little bit about that so that the everyday guy, that like me might realize an opportunity or not?
Yeah, my understanding is that so Greenwich I think is how I don't know if it's
Okay,
a
yeah, yeah. I
British
say
name.
I say Greenwich,
Gre-
but yeah,
Yeah, Greenwich I think is so that's actually Greenwich is a local brand, right? So
yeah,
that's
yeah. I think
that's
so.
so that one is it's a Jollibee. I think what happens there is a lot of franchises are kind of assumed to be locally owned, if I'm not mistaken.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so what's normally going to happen there is I think you'd have to get your wife listed as the
Right,
main owner,
right,
right?
right.
So that I think that's what's likely going to have to happen. And I don't think you have a problem there because at least, you've got a Filipino wife and
Hmm.
that's a major advantage for you so that you can actually set up a
I'm
franchise.
I'm using this as a hypothetical, but I've really and truly I've actually considered this. I have a strong feeling that, whatever funds that I might need to get, I could probably get a loan, a business loan, in my wife's name here in the Philippines. I think, we could build a strong business plan and probably get financed and do it. And I think it could be financial. It's just, what are the things that we don't know, kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
let's segue, kind of keep that topic in the front of our mind, but segue over to and let's talk about, the red tape, the bureaucracy, and the reality of doing business. So even if a foreigner wanted to invest, just how hard is it really, and what are the actual steps someone would go through to set up shop here? Now, I'm not expecting you to provide a step-by-step bullet list, but just speaking in general.
Well, yeah, there's quite a few layers there. I think there's the barangay first that you need to
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think you need to get a business permit from there. And then yeah, there's all these I think it's a DTI and then SEC. Um so there's a few offices that you're going to need to check, to go to get your business permit.
Hmm.
And I'm not exactly sure at the moment how long it takes. I do know that under President Duterte, he was able to sort of shorten things a bit, but I don't know um, you know, how fast that is now. I mean, because I think it used to be like 3 months or something,
Hmm.
and then I think that was shortened down to I don't know if it's a month or a few weeks. Um, that's something that needs to be looked at, but it's not. I don't think it's at the same pace as how Singapore allows you to set up a business where I think you go to the website and then it's like 20 minutes or an hour later you already have a registered business,
Right.
you know? Yeah, Singapore and Hong Kong are kind of like that. But maybe in the Philippines it's probably going to be a month or maybe I don't know, two weeks or a
I
month.
there was he's a Filipino, him and his wife, but they did spend about 30 years in the US, and he set up a small, coffee shop here. We've become good friends. He's got a little storage place. Actually, I call it a little storage place. It is small, but it's really, really nice storage place with a, like a banquet hall that you can rent, and then behind there they put in a coffee shop. And it took him right at a year to finally get his business license just to sell coffee. I mean,
Oh my
it
gosh.
was it
How
was
long ago was that?
well, he's up and running now, been up and running for about the past year, I want to say, but yeah, I mean, it took about a year. He had the whole place built out, and because I was actually renting the banquet hall for Sunday morning church services for
Hmm.
uh several months, about a year, 9 or 10 months. And so I got to know him real well. And they had the coffee shop all built out, fully, all of the kitchen stuff, all everything. They were all set, and they were just waiting on that permit before they could start
Oh
selling
my gosh.
coffee. And yeah, it took about a year from the time they started till the
Oh
time they
wow.
finally got the permit. And it's yeah, it's like, and he's a Filipino. He's not even a foreigner, so
Oh my gosh. That's really bad. That's really
yeah,
bad.
yeah.
That needs to change.
But he, to that point, it wasn't a national thing. It was, it was here in San Carlos. He was going through the city hall here locally. So I don't know. I didn't ask him a lot of questions about, but but yeah, so we often assume that we can just show up, register a business, and start making money, but we know, welcome to the Philippines, it's not going to be that simple. um, how do local government processes, tax policies, and work permits play into the equation? Well, I kind of know. I'm gonna let you answer that, but I kind of know that you know if we run it through our Filipino wife, then a lot of that is alleviated, for the most part. But there is the concern as a foreigner who is a partial owner in a business. Do I have to have some kind of special work visa, work permit in order to, earn money, even though the business is majority my wife's name? Or you know, I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but in my case, I would probably just put it all in her name, and I would just be a silent partner behind, I would just be funding, the business more or less.
As far as I know, that's what a lot of foreigners do, just to avoid any headaches and stuff like that.
Right.
I mean, like just to avoid all kinds of paperwork problems, like, oh, do you have this? Do you have that? And all that, all these
Mm-hmm.
little
Mm-hmm.
things. Do you have this permit that allows you to do business? Blah blah blah. And then, well, I don't think I should have a problem because I'm married to a Filipina, and so my stay here is now legal. So that shouldn't, and then most that I've heard of, what they really do is they just put put the whole, put everything in their wife's name.
And
And
so then the very next thought for a lot of my listeners, and I'm sure we'll get it in the comments, is, well, how do I know I can trust her? You know, because there's been so many, not only, people that have experienced it themselves, but then there's the horror stories, and you know how
oh
horror
yeah.
stories, they amplify and exaggerate. But, there are, valid situations where guys have lost everything,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've heard of those stories as well. And
so
that's
I guess my question, I'm sorry, don't mean to cut you off. What my question would be in that, we sort of know that already. That's without saying. What is the foreigner's route? What is his, how can he, I'm not gonna, prenup is the wrong word for it, but what kind of legal arrangement could be made that would protect him in such a, horrific case?
well, I obviously he's going to need to contact a lawyer actually to sort of see how this can work out. To be absolutely honest, Gail, this is where I come in with the advocacy, the activism that I've been doing, which is really to try to get rid of the 60/40 thing
Mm,
everywhere.
mm, mm, right,
That's why I really want to get rid of that. Because honestly, I think the 60/40, what it does is, to begin with, it actually already discourages foreigners from coming
right,
in.
sure,
So from that alone, you have a lower level, a lower volume of foreigners trying to do business in the Philippines. And because of that lower volume of foreigners coming into to the Philippines to do business, all these all these offices, the bureaucracy doesn't now get to deal with foreigners doing businesses. There's just way too few of them. And now they see these as, these are the few people that we can make money off
right,
of. I mean, this is unfortunately what happens, especially in small towns and stuff. There's going to be a little bit of that. So, oh well, probably they have a lot of money because that's usually what they think. Oh, foreigner, they probably have money. Well, let's try to make money off of them.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's why they're gonna try, they're gonna try to put some roadblocks here and there, and
mm-hmm,
it's just I don't know, human nature, right? They're just gonna say, well, we don't have these many opportunities to make money. Here's one golden opportunity. There's this one guy or these five guys just out of, I don't know. What if we had thousands of
mm-hmm,
foreigners coming in to do business? You know what? They're going to basically say, what, there's so many of them. We don't need to charge them a lot. There's so many to go by anyway. We can actually sort of, well, just get a few fees, but that's a lot of them anyway, so we'll be okay.
right,
But
right,
because there's just way too few, they're trying to sort of squeeze everything out of the very few that do
mm-hmm,
come in. So that's the reason why I think the 60/40 is actually like one of the root causes of the slower bureaucracy and
mm-hmm,
everything, because the 60/40 rule has sort of, let's say, throttled or made things a lot harder. It acts as some kind of like a bottleneck of sorts
right,
to, you could have probably had 10,000 foreigners coming in to do business, and now there's only 10, that
right,
sort of thing.
right. You know,
So,
uh, and not to wax philosophical, but for me, when I think about these kinds of things, let's say the 60/40 deal was delete and tossed in the trash can. and opened it up to, foreign investors. Uh, I'm not going to name countries, but a certain country that starts with a C, especially would be a major concern because suddenly the Philippines, mutates to become this country that starts with a C, and that's a great concern to me. Uh, being a foreigner, I see I see the value of the 60/40 policy. I agree with you. It's not it's difficult. That's the best way to put it. But I see the value in it because, as an American who believes in protecting American jobs and Americans' income, I feel like uh, in the Philippines, it's fair to want to protect Filipinos and their way of earning a living. And if all of these wealthy, foreign investors come in and take over, I have a feeling that a lot of the reason why the policy is in the Constitution is just based on the fact that the Philippines has been taken advantage of, over the centuries, and it's just a way of protecting the Filipino people. I may be completely wrong, but I have a feeling that's probably a lot of the reality of it. And
Mhm.
so again, I sort of support, but therein lies, again, from my observation, my perspective, therein lies the problem is we're here to advocate for the Philippines. So I don't want this story that I'm about to share, be a negative because, again, I'm I'm pulling for the Philippines. I want this to be positive, but I did have an experience, this is going back almost 10 years ago. A good friend of mine in the US, there in Nashville, uh, set up, came over here to the Philippines. I'm not sure how that came about, but they did a solar install over in. Actually, I'm not going to name names or specifics, but they set up a solar, install, a sizable. It was for a city government, and it was a very successful install, a very successful implementation. They powered it up, and it, performed very perfectly in every which way. But because of the 60/40 thing, you had local, you know, ownership that were, they were good, they were valued partners in the sense that they were connected. They were able to grease the skids, so to speak, when it came to a lot of the red tape and bureaucracy. But they got greedy. And then suddenly, my friend who had poured, you know, close to $1 million into that particular instance. And when I came over here, I was actually helping him to develop a second, a much larger, I mean, 10 times larger install. But the end of the story is the locals became so greedy they were that he never received one single penny. And
Oh my
all
gosh.
he did was went into hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and he literally had to completely pull out and pay off his loans. And so he just went
Oh
back
my
to
gosh.
work. He just went back to work in the U.S. He's a very high end, very, very well paid engineer. So in the solar industry and very well respected too, by the way. But, he was able to, overcome and, it wasn't a devastation. But, imagine, you dump that kind of money into a situation and then all of your great local partners, completely. So, again, if I'm advocating for the Philippines, that's not a very good story to tell, but those are the realities. Um, and I believe that applies, realistically applies to the $1 million guys down to guys like me that might want to open up a 7-Eleven or or a Greenwich pizza.
So just to clarify on a few things, so a lot of people basically think that the whole point of the 60/40 was protection from, I don't know, from, I
Mm,
guess, hostile foreigners. But then um, I would say that the 60/40 rule might not actually be the best way to do it. because like what's happening is we're also cutting off good people, good foreigners from
Mm,
actually coming in. So,
sure.
I think that's not the way it should really be done. What we can do instead is to have a rule that basically sort of um, for the sake of national security, countries that are deemed to be hostile. I mean, maybe we could have something like companies from that come from countries that are deemed hostile are put on a watch list or something of that sort.
Mm, okay.
There are other ways of doing it,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be through an ownership restriction. So, it could be, I don't know, national defense, military surveillance.
Right.
That's one way to do it. So we don't need to sort of make it harder for foreigners to own it. And like all foreigners are not allowed to own, or all
Right.
foreigners are stuck with a 60-40 rule where you're only at 40%. What about the good guys? What about the foreigners from friendly countries?
Yeah,
You
that's a
know,
good point.
what
That's a good point.
right? So that's a problem. We're going to be sort of making things harder for our friends and actually for us too, because like I
Hmm.
mean honestly, business is actually two-way. It's the business owner makes money, but we make money too. We have salaries, we get products that we need,
Yep.
etc. I mean,
Right. Right.
I think one of the biggest problems before was that the people who set up the 60-40, I mean, there was the 60-40 is actually an old rule. It
Yeah.
just kept getting expanded and expanded though. Those are from the 1930s, 1935. I mean, a lot of people in the Philippines didn't understand that business is not about exploitation. Business or economics per se is actually more of it's a win-win sort of thing.
Right.
People decide to work for a company because they think it's good for them.
Mm,
Businesses aren't just there to sort of make money and exploit. They have to produce value. They
right.
have to they have to buy things from local suppliers to be able to produce their product.
Hmm.
They have to pay employees well as well. That sort of thing. So
Yeah.
it's a two-way sort of thing. So I think the 60-40, whereas maybe it originally had some good intentions, it actually ended up having a lot of, like, say, unintended consequences
Yeah. Yeah.
that made
Right.
things worse for a lot of people.
Well, good. All of those are good points, and I do agree. I think my view, as I was describing, is more of philosophical, and it's also more of an American perspective on it. I respect that Filipinos would want to respect, but I agree with everything you're saying. Also,
Yeah, yeah.
it's
Oh,
it's
I
a
also wanted to add, Gail, I
yeah.
think in the case of the US, in the USA, the sort of protectionism in the USA isn't about not allowing foreigners to
No,
come in and own.
no,
So
it's
they
not.
say in the States, it's like, hey, come in, create a
Mm.
business,
Yeah,
but as much as possible, please, we need you to hire only Americans.
yeah, yeah.
That's kind of what it is. So and like the tariffs that's happening
It's
under President Trump, that's
it's
more of like keeping out foreign goods and saying, well, if you guys want to sell your products here, why don't you set up some factories here, assemble those products here in the States? Now you can sell them.
yeah, yeah.
So they're basically saying, President Trump was
Well,
basically saying,
y- you know,
come here and create jobs for our people, then you can sell your products.
at a very high level, equal opportunity is
Yeah,
really what what
exactly.
what is the driving, and as you said, when certain countries come in and they set up shop. Let's use, like a Toyota or a Honda or something like that, set up a manufacturing plant, and then they import or immigrate a bunch of, Japanese in to to work. That's not quite what the intention of of the equal opportunity.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
And in the same light, if the US builds, like Fender guitars are built in Mexico and in the US, in Indonesia, in China, we're not shipping Americans over to populate those factories. We're using, in fact, the whole reason for doing it is to provide jobs, and on the less positive side, to leverage the lower cost of labor. So okay, so the next thing I wanted to hit you up on is the why not Thailand or Vietnam problem. If a Westerner investor has a million to set up a manufacturing plant or a call center, or why should they pick the Philippines over Thailand or Vietnam?
Well, they definitely should pick the Philippines over Thailand or Vietnam because if it's going to
Okay.
be a call center, that's where the English language skills are. I mean, and it
Yeah,
doesn't have
but
to be just call
oh,
centers. Anything
okay,
like
okay, but
business process out,
we
yeah,
talked about
business
this,
process outsourcing as well. All that requires a lot of English language knowledge and proficiency, which is present locally in the Philippines, and you won't necessarily find the same levels over there. I mean, you won't find them at all.
right?
So,
But
you know,
but
mhm.
AI, AI,
Yeah, AI
you know,
is becoming the bigger challenge now, and that's why I
yep.
think the Philippines, in a way, has missed a bit of the boat there because we could have actually had so many more opportunities during the whole period at
Mm-hmm.
which we really wanted to take advantage of that trend. So I really feel sad that we had these impediments imposed on ourselves because we did that to ourselves. By putting the 60/40,
Right.
we made things harder for ourselves. One thing, Gail, it's like, how the US has these like trade sanctions or economic
Mm-hmm.
sanctions against countries that it doesn't like,
Yeah.
right? So, like, let's say, for example, Cuba, right? Uh, the USA imposes certain restrictions on Cuba. Hey, no one's going to go there to invest in business. You guys can't buy some of our stuff, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all these economic sanctions, right?
Yeah.
And those make things harder for the people there. Now, the Philippines did that to ourselves with the 60/40.
Oh,
We put economic sanctions on ourselves by making that 60/40 thing. We're basically making it harder for foreigners to come in and invest and create jobs in the Philippines. And that actually is a self-sabotaging move.
yeah.
That's what it is.
That's unfortunate. Well, and I did a video a couple of months ago on there was this video that came out. It popped up into my feed, and I looked at it and I watched it, and it was a Filipina, a young Filipina who was obviously very, very Americanized, had very little Philippines accent, and demonstrated obvious intelligence. Her video was well done and well spoken. However, she really, really, really sensationalized the negative impact that AI is going to have on the Philippines economy. I mean, it was, literally her way of like just getting 100,000 views. And so I watched the video and I'm like, it ain't that bad. It's not. But she raised some good points. So I made sort of a reaction video, even though I didn't react to her video. I didn't react to anything she said. I didn't, I just literally came up with my own perspective and shared my thoughts on it. That the Philippines, in my opinion, right now we're I think of 2 years ago when ChatGPT came out, that really was like that was the iPhone popping in 2007. You know,
Yeah.
ChatGPT coming on the scene 2 years ago, what to me was just as impactful to society as was the iPhone in 2007. I think
Hmm.
we'll be able to look at 2023 as, a new era. Uh, you know, I mean, that's the way I see it. And so, uh, with that being said, we're still, relatively young in, implementing AI into our, day-to-day work or whatever. I think that there's a massive opportunity for the Philippines to say, okay, let's don't run from AI. Let's don't quit our jobs and go home. Let's embrace AI, learn how to utilize AI, learn how to implement it in, in other words, I'm also in the drone industry. And with
Mhm.
technology, emerging technology, now, you can set preset drone flight programs to, to fly and do an inspection autonomously. So what do you need a drone pilot for? Well, okay, so we have to adapt. That drone pilot says, okay, well, if I'm going to stay relevant, I've got to adapt and to not only, you know, see the technology, but leverage the technology for myself and offer that to my clients.
Mhm.
Make it a part of your business. So that's kind of what I'm saying about AI, where it comes to call center, because I don't care. For me, if I'm calling in and I need to have a customer support issue, I am not going to be satisfied talking to an AI robot. I don't care how good it is. I want the sensitivity and the nuance that a human, provides. So for me, specifically in the BPO, the call center, market here in the Philippines, I think rather than be afraid of it, embrace it. Uh, and these call center operators need to figure out how to utilize AI, make it a part of their business offering to remain relevant, and yet still, a lot of Americans, and this is kind of a negative thing to say, but a lot of Americans don't like to hear an accent when they want to hear an American accent, supporting them. I have a different, view on that because for me, it's kind of fun even when I'm calling from my U.S. phone line to get support on an American, bank or something like that, and a Filipino answers, I recognize the accent. I'm like, hey, are you in Negros? Are you in Manila? Are you, you know, and it's for me that's kind of fun. But you get the point. The point is not to run from it or be afraid of it, but is to embrace it and implement.
Embrace it and yeah, and utilize it. You
Yeah,
utilize
yeah.
it, take advantage of it, use it to enhance what you've already
So,
got.
so you started out by saying, answering Thailand or Vietnam question by saying that, we should absolutely consider the Philippines because of the English speaking. But let's move beyond call center. What other opportunities are there to, leverage, in other words, what are the opportunities besides call centers? Just forget that, for people to look at Philippines versus, the other countries.
There still are a lot of manufacturing opportunities in the Philippines, really. I mean, like because we have a huge pool of engineering talent and stuff
Hmm.
like that. So there's really all these industries that can be opened up to more foreign businesses to come in. So manufacturing and consulting and a lot of other stuff. There's
Why
really
why
so many.
isn't why isn't there, when I think about the broad spread of land, between where I live in Bacolod City, you see vast areas of land, once you get past the mountains, of course. But my thought is why aren't companies building car manufacturing plants here? What is the deal? Why only you get my point. Why are these big companies? Why aren't the Philippines making cell phones like Vietnam? Samsung manufactures all of their Samsung phones in Vietnam. Why aren't they being
Yeah.
made in the Philippines? You see what I'm saying?
Well,
That's
okay.
that's my
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. So one of the things about the 60/40, right, is that they you can choose which sectors to sort of close off, or which are the ones that you want to sort of make it harder for foreigners to come in. So in the Philippines, there are industries that have been sort of opened up and said like, those industries will not be subjected to the 60/40 law,
Mm.
right? So manufacturing is one of those which allows foreigners to easily come in, foreign companies to easily come in with no need to go through or go under the 60/40 rules.
Oh, okay.
Problem, but there's a problem. The rule about allowing manufacturing to come in, that's like an old rule based on how things were done in the 70s and 80s,
Okay.
right? In the old days, uh, companies that do manufacturing, they go inside a country, and it's one single entity that goes there. So maybe it's Procter and Gamble, they go there, or maybe Coca-Cola, they go there as Coca-Cola, or whatever. Ford comes in, and it's one Ford entity
Mm,
that comes in.
mm-hmm.
They say, we're a manufacturing company. We'd like to set up. Okay, sure, no problem. Come in. But that business model of a single entity manufacturing company coming in is long gone. It ended in the 1990s, when the so-called outsourcing trend first started. There was this whole trend. I think it was a management thing. It's one of these things that a lot of these MBAs and management gurus talked about, that a company should do what it does best, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they started like outsourcing, or sort of like they started splitting the company into various little divisions.
Mm-hmm.
And like, okay, this company does the HR side of things. This part of the company does, I don't know, one side of this intellectual copyright protection stuff, and this other part does the actual manufacturing, and this other part does something else. And so instead of having one single company,
Mm-hmm.
you probably have five, six, or seven little other companies instead,
Right.
right?
Right.
Now, nowadays, if they go to another country, it's all of these five or six or seven companies that come together,
Okay.
not a single entity. Out of those five or six or seven companies that go inside a country, only one of them is an actual manufacturing company,
Mm.
right? The
Okay.
others are going to be like, I don't know, we're the accounting division, we're the finance division, but they're all finance, they're all companies that are separate
Right.
because of the whole outsourcing trend, or the whole, like, you do what you do best, you specialize,
Yeah.
right? So there will now be not just one company that is considered a manufacturing company, but you will have probably seven companies, and only one of them is a manufacturer. And what
Wow.
happens there, when they try to come into the Philippines, all seven of these companies, a few of them will get hit by the 60/40 rule,
Hmm.
because only one of them is going to be considered exempted. Only the manufacturing company is allowed. Oh, you can go own 100%.
Mm-hmm.
But sorry, your human resource company, which is actually really a division of your company, but that you put that in as an outsourced human resource company. They won't be allowed, because they're not allowed to own 100%. They'll have to be subjected to the 40% rule. Oh, and yeah, this other company here, the accounting division, that also needs to be subjected to the 40% limit. And so when the big company says, wait a minute, so you're saying that two out of my seven companies are not allowed to come in as 100% wholly owned by a foreign entity sort of
Mm-hmm.
company. If that's what you're saying, that my two other companies are not allowed to come in, well, you know what? The whole entourage is not going. We're not going to the Philippines, because, like,
Oh, wow.
you're telling. So it's kind of like seven people from the same family are going to a country club, and the
Right.
country club says, "Hey, sorry, we oh no, sorry, you want to go inside a fine dining restaurant, right? Seven people in the
Mm.
same family." And the fine dining restaurant says, sorry, but you can't be wearing short pants, you can't be wearing
Ah,
flip
yeah.
flops,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And oops, there's out of your seven people in your family, there's two people who are not properly dressed. I'm sorry, we can't let those two people in. The whole
Wow.
family won't go.
Wow. Wow.
The whole family won't go. So that's what happens to the Philippines. So even though we allow manufacturing, they're not coming in, because a manufacturing company is no longer a single entity. It's
Mm,
actually made up of like, I don't know, seven or more, and sometimes even more divisions who have been divided into different companies.
gotcha.
And if
Gotcha.
one or two of them are not allowed to come in, they're going to basically say, well, the whole group's not coming in.
Mm, wow.
Right?
Well,
If you
I
don't allow my grandmother or my little baby to come into the restaurant, we're not the whole group is not coming in.
wow.
It's usually how it works, right?
That's
We'll
crazy.
find some other place. If these guys don't want us in, we'll find
Yeah.
somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that's a shame. So the next question I kind of had in mind, we've already touched on this a good bit actually, but to be sort of specific, when it comes to industries that, actually work for foreigners here in the Philippines, uh, we've talked about BPOs, call centers, remote services. We talked about why not, manufacturing plants such as, wouldn't it be awesome to see Tesla come in here or something like that? Uh,
definitely.
there is tourism and hospitality. Is this still a gold mine or is the market saturated? But what about tech? What about tech startups? What's the real potential for innovation hubs like Singapore here in the
No,
Philippines?
there's actually a lot of potential for that. I mean, really, I mean, these tech startups are allowed to be to come in with full foreign ownership. That's not a problem. Um, One of the problems, and I'm just going to say one of the problems is sometimes though, there are unscrupulous elements that would weaponize the Constitution
Mm.
against the startup that they think is a threat. So I'll give you an
Mm.
example.
Okay.
In I don't know if you guys have this company called Angkas in Negros. So it operates largely here in Metro
Oh, is
Manila.
that
So
the
it's
is that the motorcycle
the motorcycle
grab?
thing, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. I'm
It's
familiar.
like
We
a
don't
Grab for
we
motorcycles,
don't
right?
have it here, but I know what
You
you're
don't
talking
have that
about.
there, okay?
Yeah,
But they're mostly here in Metro Manila.
right.
So they're like a Grab, and for all intents and purposes, what they really are is they're an IT company. They're a tech startup. They're a tech
Okay.
they're a tech company, right?
Makes sense.
They
Yeah.
they are they are an IT company that creates an that made created and maintains an application, a mobile app,
Hmm.
so that people can look for a ride and say, "Oh, I need to go from this place to that place, and I
Yeah.
need it now." Okay,
Yep.
that's what it is, right?
Yep. Yep.
Now, uh, there were some taxi operators, I think
Hmm.
some transport operators here in the Philippines who
I remember all of
lodged a
this.
complaint.
Yeah, I
They were
remember all.
they lodged a complaint against to the authorities, the LTFRB,
Yep. Yep.
saying, "Hey, Angkas is taking our business away, and these guys
Hmm.
are actually against the Constitution." And they weaponized the Constitution by saying, "See, Angkas is actually some kind of a public utility because they're used. They are a public utility. They are a public transport operator,
Hmm.
and they shouldn't be allowed because they're foreign owned. The owner of the company, or at least the majority owner of the company and CEO at that time, was Angeline Tam. So
Okay.
Angeline Tam is actually from Singapore. She's Singaporean,
Oh, okay.
and it was mostly her money that she put in, right? And they were basically saying they are in violation of the Constitution because she's a foreigner. How can she be allowed to own a public utility?
Hmm.
Right? Now, instead of arguing against that, because it was going to be a major, I don't know, it would have been a major issue, a major uh, draw uh, on their time. It would really take a lot of time
Hmm.
and effort away from doing business. They said, you know what we're gonna do, we're just gonna restructure our ownership. And luckily, Angeline Tam is married to a Filipino,
Oh,
George
okay.
Royeca. So
Okay.
what they just basically did to get away from the problems was, oh, all right, you know what we're gonna do? George is now going to be the main guy. On paper, he's now going to be the main guy, and he's going to be the main shareholder, and no issues anymore.
Hmm.
So my point is, this is just an example of how the 1987 Constitution of the Philippines regularly gets weaponized
Mm,
against businesses that are doing well or doing a good job, even
okay.
though they may actually be allowed,
Right.
even
Right.
though for all intents and purposes, they are not supposed to be included in the group of companies that are prohibited or restricted
Wow.
from operating in the Philippines. That's one example. There's another one. FedEx.
Hmm.
FedEx.
Okay.
Everybody knows FedEx,
Yeah, sure.
right? Uh, I mean, it's from the U.S., majority
Hmm.
American owned company,
Yeah.
and many years ago, I think a little over 20 years ago, there was a local courier operator that lodged a complaint against them, saying that they are actually operating a public utility, and because they are majority American owned, they are in violation.
Hmm.
And the crazy courts, for some weird reason, upheld that. Oh yeah, they are indeed foreign owned, and they are a utility. But everybody knows the FedEx is not a utility. They're not an electricity company. They're not a right. They're not a telecoms operator. They're just a courier
They're just
company.
logistics. That's it.
Logistics, that's what they are. But
Yeah.
then, so why suddenly call them a public utility and say, oh, see, look, according to Article 12 of the 1987 Constitution, there's a
Hmm.
section there that says that public utilities must be 60% owned by Filipinos, and only 40% is the maximum. That company, being American, is not allowed to be here as a public utility. Exact same thing that was done to Angkas, right?
But
So
it, but it,
Angkas,
but it was overruled because FedEx is here, right?
they're still here because it's under appeal, if I'm not mistaken. So,
Well, I mean, what about DHL? What about UPS? What
I
about?
know that's the problem, right? So why only FedEx? So that's a weird thing.
Yeah.
So they were, but basically it's like, oh, okay, fine. You get slapped with a lawsuit, then you fight it out in court. So while it's fighting out in court, you're fighting it out in court. You're still able to operate. That's what's been happening to FedEx. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's one of these things that a lot of people in Singapore were laughing at, and
Hmm.
that's kind of why the Philippines was never really able to attract as much in terms of investment as other countries have, because everybody is wary. You know, if we go to the Philippines, suddenly some weirdo might just suddenly uh, launch an attack on us and say that we are in violation of the Constitution because we are a public
Well,
utility, even if we're not. You
and
know.
this is a perfect segue into another thing I wanted to touch on actually is culture. I mean, the cultural factor. Can the Philippines
Yeah.
adapt to a competitive global market? Here's some of my notes. Even if the laws change, even if the 60/40 was to go away, if foreign investment is encouraged, do you think the cultural mindset is ready to embrace a globalized economy? You know, the speed of adaptation, does the mñana habit slow things down in business? That's procrastination. Filipino time. The risk tolerance. Is the Philippine business culture too risk averse for aggressive foreign investors? I would, in my own personal experience, I would say yes to that. Uh, you know, being adverse, I would say yes to that. Um,
Mhm.
Workforce expectations, are Filipino professionals trained to think like entrepreneurs, or is there still a dependence on higher hierarchical? Can't read my own writing. corporate structure. So yeah, I'll throw that back to you.
Yeah. I actually believe that cultures are malleable,
Hmm.
cultures are changeable,
Hmm.
and I've seen a perfect example of that in
Well, and
Singapore.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I do want to add this. I don't necessarily mean to overly generalize. Yeah, I know that
Yeah,
there are
obviously.
wonderful, trustworthy, great people in the Philippines. So I'm not generalizing, but at the same time, there is a perspective, and there is a reality to some of those things that I
Yeah.
mentioned.
So, but like I was saying, cultures do change,
Hmm. Hmm.
cultures adapt, and the perfect example is Singapore. Singapore used to be a very dirty place, honestly, back in the old days. People had really, really bad habits of spitting around everywhere.
Mm.
And that's the way it was because my dad used to be he was able to fly over to Singapore for business back in the 80s, and he was able to still see some of the bad habits that people still had in the 80s. People were still spitting around everywhere.
Mm.
It was and Lee Kuan Yew was trying to do his best to try to stamp that out. And I
It's
think
kind of
that
like
got stamped out in the
it,
in the
it,
90s. In the
it's kind of
90s,
like it's
that's
kind of
when
like Filipinos getting off their motorcycle and taking a piss right on the side of the street. It's
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah. I mean, things like that change, right?
yeah, yeah,
Th-
yeah.
those
How
people.
do you really feel about that, Orion?
I really, it's obvious, right? Get rid of them. Get rid of them. Let the foreign investors come in and create jobs.
Wow.
When people have jobs, people will get forced to act accordingly.
Sure, sure.
And especially when jobs become so abundant
Mm-hmm.
everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
the general cultural mindset is going to change. Why? People are going to be less tolerant of lazy people. There's people because
Yeah.
right now there are people who are just basically lazing off and just drinking beer at the roadside, and people are saying, well, there just aren't any jobs anyway. So what are we going to do? There,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what happens. We just tolerate it because there's really nothing else. But once jobs become so abundant, people are going to say, what the heck are you doing just lazing around? There's so many jobs out there.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's earning their keep, everybody's earning a living, and you're just like lazing off, thinking that we're going to give you money. No, no, we're not going to give you. We're throwing you out of the house unless you get yourself a job.
Right.
You know, and that's going to happen if jobs become so abundant
Mm-hmm.
in the Philippines. And I don't give a damn who owns the company.
Yeah.
Just
Sure.
bring the companies in. I don't care who owns the companies. I was an OFW already. I don't care who owns the company I work
Yeah.
for.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
millions of Filipinos are OFWs. Millions of Filipinos abroad are working for non-Filipino employers. We don't give a damn about
Right.
who owns the companies.
Right. Right.
So let them come into the Philippines. What's wrong? Right?
Yeah.
Let them come into the Philippines so that Filipinos don't need to leave anymore.
Yeah.
People can have good jobs in the Philippines
And
without having to be far away from their families.
and that's exactly what I was going to say. Have the great home life as well as your work
Yeah,
life, as well as a real balance. And that hits on a something that's really close to home. I talked to you about that the last time we talked. Is you know people leaving their families for years at a time, and also considering it acceptable. Uh, you know, it's for the betterment of my family, but there's got to be a better way. It's just got to
there's
be
a
a better
better
way.
way. Let the foreign investors come in. I don't care. Let them
Yeah.
come in. Let them come in. Create the jobs. And when the jobs are so plentiful, when the jobs are so abundant, people will be very intolerant of
Right.
laziness
Right.
and slacking off and just basically, people will be so intolerant of moochers,
Yeah.
people just mooching off other people. Essentially, cultures change. So right now there's a lot of negatives that can be seen. There's a lot of people who basically are just lazing off and you've got the mñana habit and all that stuff.
Hmm.
But that thing can easily go away once you've actually set up the right systems. And one of the things that needs to happen when we change the systems and the environment by basically getting rid of all those 60/40 and stuff like that, 60/40 and other anti-foreign investment restrictions in the Constitution, as well as in policy and in legislation. If we're able to sort of whittle that down to a minimum, so
Yeah.
that we really encourage
Right.
and attract a lot of investors to come in, and I mean lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of job creating companies to come in,
Yeah.
and I don't care where they're from.
Yeah.
Just let them come in. They will come in and create lots and lots of jobs.
And
Good jobs
probably
too.
well-paying jobs too.
Yeah, well, good jobs, well-paying jobs.
Yeah.
That's going to happen when the jobs suddenly start to outnumber the number of of applicants.
Hmm.
I mean, obviously, basic economics, a law of supply and demand. Once you start to have more jobs than there are job seekers, then the wages start to improve because obviously the companies are going to start uh, competing against each other to bring in more, to bring in more applicants. Hey, don't go to them, go to us. We
Yeah.
we offer twice the salary than those guys.
Right.
And those guys don't want to be left behind. No, no, no. We've increased their salary as well. We're at the same as them. Or no, no, no. We're making our salary offers higher than theirs. These guys are all going to try to outbid each other. And when
Capitalism
that
in
happens,
capitalism in the most positive sense, possible.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what we want. That's what
Yeah.
we want.
Yeah.
So let the job creating entities come in. We don't care where they're from. Let's just let them come in. They'll create jobs. They will attract people to work for them. And then as more and more people have jobs, ordinary Filipinos will no longer tolerate
Mm.
lazing around.
Yeah.
People will basically say, hey, everybody's got a job except you. What the hell are you doing lazing around on the couch all day watching TV? What the heck? You know,
Right.
I would have understood if you're sick or you're incapacitated or something. But what are you doing?
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
able-bodied. Why aren't you going to work?
Right.
And that's what's going to happen. The whole culture is going to change. People who don't want to work will get ostracized. No one's going to get tolerated or accepted for just, oh yeah, that's fine. You know,
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
these problems will no longer be acceptable. So people are basically going to say, "Come on, guys, there's so many jobs there. Look at the help wanted ads. They're
Yeah.
they're all around." So
It's no
that's
longer
going
an
to happen.
excuse. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's no longer an excuse. And then people are going to say, "Oh, the excuse right now is, yeah, but then I spend more to get to work and I don't earn enough. So I mean, I'd rather just stay here
Which
than
is a
take."
valid point. It really
Yeah,
is.
exactly.
But
Right. That's the situation right now because jobs are so few, and therefore, if jobs are too few,
mhm.
salaries are so low, right? But that's all going to change when we have more and more jobs.
Right.
So
I
the
totally agree. I could not
the way
agree
I
more.
see it, all Filipinos, the government themselves especially, they have to change the policy of keeping foreigners out by maintaining the 60/40. It's outdated, it's wrong, it doesn't work. I mean, when we're
Okay.
talking
Okay.
about if we're
Okay.
talking about protecting the country, there's other ways of doing it, but the
Yeah.
60/40 is not the way to do it.
Well, you've already answered my question, but if you had 10 minutes alone, let's say in a car with President Marcos, and he was in a position to actually enact, what major reform would you pitch that would attract, foreign investors? I mean, what would that be? And I already know the answer, but go ahead.
Well, I would tell President Marcos in that 10 minutes, look, we really desperately need to erase as much as possible all anti-foreign investment restrictions in the Constitution. I mean, well, I wouldn't say if
Well,
possible. I would say no, get rid of all of them in the Constitution, and
all
then whittle down all of them, all of them,
or
all.
or rewrite all.
No, yeah, all restrictions against foreign investors that are in the Constitution should be removed,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
then any legislation that still remains, we whittle them down to a minimum.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also 60/40, no more 60/40. Whatever says 60/40, turn that into 50, turn that into 51/49.
Hmm. That would,
51-49, kind
yeah,
of like
yeah.
what some countries in Asia. If I'm not mistaken, I think Vietnam has a few of those. Thailand has some of those too,
Hmm.
right? But it's
Okay.
51-49. So it's almost 50-50
Right,
with a
right.
slight advantage to the local investor.
Yeah.
Now,
Gotcha.
that's only for certain, that's only going to be for um, the so-called sensitive industries.
Okay.
Most other industries should be open. Just let them come in. And I'm going to tell the president this. Just please do everything you can to get rid of all restrictions that are keeping foreign investors out. All Get rid of everything that is discouraging foreign investors from coming in. The
Yeah.
Constitution is the main stumbling block. Please get that fixed. Please
Well,
prioritize removing those foreign investment
I
restrictions and
uh
stop
I
creating
I think that
companies out.
I think that Marcos in particular is probably more open, to these
Yeah.
concepts than say, President Duterte would have been. And by the way, I'm not necessarily a fan of either or an opposer of either. I think they both have, great qualities.
Mhm.
I have my concerns about both as well, but I have concerns about Trump, and I am a Trump supporter, but I have my deep concerns about him and his ways of doing things. But in any case, well, hey, just I think we've really covered it. I this turned out, in my opinion, this turned out to be a much more informative and impactful conversation than I it really even expected it to be. So I think it's great. I think our viewers, especially those interested, whether you're the $1 million guy or the everyday guy like me, I think that there's opportunity here. And I'm not necessarily, it's not a today thing, but I am in the mind to look at bringing we have tons of 7-Eleven here. So we don't need any more of those, but I would love to see a Greenwich or a KFC or a Pizza Hut or something. Uh, it's pointless to think of Taco Bell. Isn't it funny that my ideas are all food? But anyway, but hey, Orion, I really appreciate your time. I know you're busy and it's this, but I think for my audience in particular, I think this is great stuff and really valuable. So appreciate your time. Did you have anything you wanted to say before we close it out?
Well, yeah, to everyone listening, both foreign and Filipino, please spread the word. Please,
Ah, yeah.
spread the word about the need to get rid of these
I'll,
restrictions,
I'll I'm gonna
particularly in the
put I'm
Philippines.
gonna put all of your links in the description the same as before, but just briefly talk a little bit about your advocacies because I know you have several different platforms.
Sure, sure. Yeah, so I've got this advocacy called the Correct Movement. So the
Right.
Correct Movement, correct actually stands for uh, constitutional reform and rectification for economic competitiveness and transformation.
Mm-hmm.
So we're making it clear that the whole intention of reforming the Constitution is to make the Philippines more economically competitive
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to transform the country for the better.
Right.
The
Gotcha.
whole point is number one, get rid of all anti foreign investment restrictions in the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's why we need that so that we have all the jobs and economic opportunities. But number two, we don't want all these opportunities that will be created by all these foreign investors coming in to only come into Metro Manila.
Right.
We want
Right.
them going to the rest of the country.
Yeah.
And for that to happen, we need federalism.
Okay.
Federalism, like what happens in the States, allows the subnational
Yep.
uh,
Mm.
national units of the country. So in the case of the Philippines, that'll be the regions and the provinces. We want them to have the ability to set up policies that are attractive
Yeah.
to investors. I don't know. That might mean something like a 10-year tax, tax
Yeah.
exemption. First 10
Mhm.
years, you create a company that brings in what I don't know, $1 million or $1 billion to come in and creates lots and lots of jobs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You let them come in, and then they create all those jobs, and you don't need to pay taxes for the next 10 years. If these subnational units, the regions and all that, they're able to create policies like that, then all these different regions all around the country will be able
That's
to
interesting. Yeah.
attract investors over. And probably even Metro Manila will get decongested because it really is so overcrowded,
Hmm.
overpolluted, overcongested. So many people. Traffic jams are terrible everywhere
Yep.
in Metro Manila.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
that'll go away once we have federalism because people will start moving away from Metro Manila and going to the rest of
Exactly.
the country,
Yeah. No,
right?
yeah, I never even thought about that. That's a
And
great
that's
idea.
what we need. That's the second part that we need, right?
Yep.
And then the
Yep.
third part is to fix our government system, So, at least what I've seen in say how Singapore works, Malaysia works, and other countries like a lot of other countries, it turns out a parliamentary system is actually better than a presidential system.
Hmm.
And the US actually has what is known as a quasi uh, parliamentary system in the form of the Electoral College. So, because you know how it is in the US, you're not really directly electing the president. What you're really electing are electors
Yeah. Yep.
from either party. So when you say I want to
Hmm.
go for Trump or I want to go for Harris or whatever, when you say Harris, you're actually voting for the Democrat
Yeah.
electors. When you say
Correct.
Trump, you're actually voting for the
Republican. Yeah.
Republican electors in your
Correct.
state.
Correct.
Now, a parliamentary system is like that.
I
That's the
see.
same thing.
Okay.
You're not voting directly for the prime minister. You're voting for the um,
The party.
the MPs, the parliamentarians in your group. You're voting for the parties, basically.
Yep.
You're
Yep.
voting for the parties, and that would sort of change the dynamics so that we don't have so much of the toxicity that we have and too much of the celebrity,
Hmm.
showbiz, and popularity type of stuff that's going on right now. We're going to hear more rational arguments. We're going to hear more people talking about platforms, principles, and programs, and what are their planned projects. What are
Yeah.
the things that they want to do, rather than oh yeah, marry me because I got a beautiful wife. Oh, vote for me because I've got I'm handsome and I'm an actor. That
Yeah.
sort of thing. You're not going to hear that. You're
Right.
you're going to hear more of
Right.
vote for my party because we stand for lower taxes, better
Mm.
businesses,
Mm.
blah 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 blah
Right.
blah.
Right.
And the other guys are going to say, well, vote for our party because we want to give a lot of free stuff away. I don't know. So they're
Yeah.
going to talk about what they want to do rather than like how popular they are, or
Hmm.
do all kinds of song and dance numbers during the campaigns. They're not going to do much of that under this newer system. And yeah, these are the three things we need,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Remove the foreign investment restrictions, federalism, and then shift to a parliamentary system.
Got it.
So
Got it.
that's what I think the Philippines needs to do.
Well, man, more power to you. Godspeed with all of that, and you've got my support for sure. But I think we're
Thanks,
going to wrap
Gail.
it up.
Yep.
Great talk. I think when I think we don't really have anything else to talk about, we come up with a great conversation. So let's continue this on a monthly basis. I
Oh
think it's
yeah,
good stuff.
definitely.
All right, man. Well, have a good
Good
day.
stuff.
God bless.
You too.
And to
God
all of our
bless.
viewers, thanks for watching, especially if you watch to the end. Do hit that subscribe, do hit that like. All of that helps the channel, and we'll see you in the next episode. Have a great day.